Welcome, welcome, welcome. Pastor Lacey, we're certainly delighted to have you be able to share with us, even in this moment. I'm not in my studio at the house. I'm not at the church. As you can tell, I'm on the road. One of our members said I look like I'm in a hostage video. I'm here by choice. I'm in Orlando. But I'm about to leave because the storm ain't passed over. The storm is coming in. And but we're delighted to certainly be here. And I'm just delighted for the gift of technology, for this wonderful opportunity for us to be able to share together as we continue in our civics conversation. So I'm encouraged you to be able to tag and share, encourage people to be able to share with this. I can just tell you this. I have a lot of friends. A lot of friends lie and a lot of friends don't. And the friends that don't said, I took a look at part of civics and they said they really missed it. And so did many of you as members, and that's why I didn't decide to cancel while I was down here. But before we start, I do have bad news. We will not meet for Bible study on tomorrow. Just in abundance of caution, we're going to see if I'm going to get out. I don't know. We're going to figure it out. The airport closes tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so we'll see what time they're going to change my flight to be able to go. But nonetheless, we're going to do this and we're going to enjoy our time together. So I thank you all for thinking it out. Robbery, I'm glad over this whole hiatus, Deacon Iris Hall hasn't been able to participate and now she is back. So hey, the world is right. So with that being said, I'm going to ask the vice chair of our trustee ministry and the historian of the church, if Trustee Gary Michael King could lead us in prayer.
All right, let us bow our heads. Dear Lord, our God, we thank you for allowing us to get together this evening. We thank you for the technology that has brought us together from near and far all across this great nation. And now we yield to your power and to your servant, our pastor, one Adolphus Clarence Lacey, to continue to teach us and lead us as you want us to be led. Let us open our minds and open our ears and open our hearts and especially open our minds to take in everything that is going to be shared with us tonight. This we ask in thy name, the name of thy Son, our Savior, Jesus the Christ, in the name of the Holy Spirit, we pray and say together, Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Trustee Gary. It's interesting when we talked yesterday, and again, we focus on Zoom because that's what I see. If I had another monitor, we can do Facebook, we can do our website and all that stuff. But I believe Justin's monitoring that. But sometimes information comes back. But I said something last week, and my sister Debbie Daniels was listening, and we talked about me with Addison Lacey, who will be my great grandfather, Addison Lacey, and not being able to trace and trying to find his lineage. And so she opened up a search and was let me know that my great grandfather voted in the 1870 election. I loved it. And so were all of the male children in the household. They voted. She's working on it. And then she stumbled. We don't know how we're related, but then she stumbled upon somebody whose name was Caesar Lacey. Somebody stopped me because I think, please don't say Clarence no more. Let's call me Adolphus C. Lacey, and the C stands for Caesar. Okay, that's what we about to do. It's an unofficial change. It's in my blood. It's in my genes. I'm excited. It's important. Again, I say you can't hate the monarchy because they're able to trace back their lineage. And that's how we've been handicapped to not know how great we are. And Caesar Lacey worked in the Freedmen's Bureau. He also was a lieutenant in the Union Army. I'm like, I fought for this country. My family did. I feel real good. I dare somebody talk about I don't belong here. And I wish everybody could feel the same joy that I have. I can't wait for her to finish the results. But Debbie, thank you, my sister from Grace Baptist Church in Mount Vernon under the leadership of W. Franklin Richardson, our pastor. Thank you for just sharing that. You just brought life to my soul and wanted to share that with the congregation. So as Adolphus C. Lacey, if you want to say something, just make me an honorary Caesar. How about that? That sounds good in this place. So certainly thankful for each of you all who thought it not robbery to be able to share with us even in this time. So the hour spent 7:05, spend a little time as we can today, focusing on our government at work, And in your on the chat, you can get the syllabus. So I encourage those who are watching online on Facebook. I also encourage you to be able to tag and share. Let somebody know to come in because they're watching. And as we look at government at work, and we want them to come early because they end up coming up late and I'm ready to leave. And then they've now let me know they're there. So I want to continue. But I ain't trying to continue. I'm in Florida. Even though it's raining, I'm in Florida. So I still want to be able to chill. So here we are, looking at government at work. So when we look at government at work, we're looking at government values, particularly the government values that we hold as people of the United States of America, based upon this founding. And again, I'm not saying what it lives up to, I'm saying what was its purpose. And that's what we have to learn how to do, to separate the two as you engage in education and in perfection. But by most accounts, the US government is based on the ideals of limited government, natural rights, popular sovereignty, republicanism with a small r, not the big R, and the social contract. Those elements. And that's what we say our government lives up to the best of its intention if we understand these things. And it's important for you to know these things so that when you're engaged in a debate with somebody, who dares to debate somebody who goes to the history-making Bethany Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York? I mean, they debate at their peril because you know the facts. So what do we mean by limited government? Limited government is a political system in which there are certain restrictions placed on the government to protect individual rights and liberties. And the greatest element of our form of limited government takes place in our Constitution. How, beloved? This is review. Okay, Gary, help them.
Are you talking about the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
No.
Okay.
I said the Constitution.
Okay, that's true. That's a declaration.
That's correct. So in the Constitution, how do we see what limits government? Anybody want to help, Gary?
Well, I would say, well, in addition to the Bill of Rights, all the amendments.
No, stop. I heard you. Stop. Just say the last part.
Amendments.
No, I mean the
Bill
first
of Rights.
The Bill of Rights. Remember, the first 10 limits the power of government. Yeah, y'all see what I'm saying? So what? Because remember last week we dealt with the monarchy. So America is a response to a monarchy. And what they're saying is we want government, but we don't want an absolute government. We want a limited government, which means that the people have some type of rights. And so when you look at the first 10 amendments, those amendments tell the government what it can't do to the people. Y'all with me? Questions for review? Okay, so y'all got it. Okay. So if I ask you again and I don't call Gary, next time you all know the first sign of what it means to limit our government was, again, remember, the government shall not abridge the right for the free press, that they cannot force a faith upon you, cannot take your arms, cannot quarter in your place. All of these things were saying what the government could not do. Later on, our government in the amendments are talking about what the government can do in that regard. So we got limited government. But then what Gary did talk about was the aspect of natural rights. And I said unalienable rights. That was a typo. It actually is it's inalienable rights, which we get from John Locke. And John Locke said is life, liberty, and property, which is interesting because he was an Englishman. And so therefore he wanted to be able to control his property, and his property could be a slave and a woman. In that regard, Thomas Jefferson, who still had slaves and women, he basically said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Gary, where did he say that?
He said that right in the opening of the Declaration of Independence.
There you go. That's that standard. Now, see, the Declaration of Independence is not our Constitution, but it is a guiding declaration to what we are able to believe. It's sort of like a motto, but it isn't necessarily enforceable. It's ideals. So now what we have is America. That's what you got to say. What America, when it's designed, believes in an aspect of limited government, natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what does that pursuit of happiness means? And what is the life and what is the liberty? The aspect of freedom. But nonetheless, that's how that defined. And what it says is what Thomas Jefferson argued and John Locke argued is that all human beings are born with them. But when we say that, then they said that therefore that African Americans and women were not human beings. Reactions. I'll keep going. Okay. Limited government, natural rights. And then you have the social contract. The social contract, that's by Thoreau. And that's the ideal that government powers comes from the will. That's the ideal is the social contract is when society as a whole agrees to give up some of its freedoms to be protected by the federal government. So that means that even though I have a right to carry arms, I believe the federal government knows more and I'm willing to surrender my right. Even though I have a right to say what I want to, I believe for a greater interest, I'm willing to suspend some of my rights so that the federal government might be able to protect me. So for example, you have a right to free speech, but you don't have a right to slander. And you don't have a right to yell fire in a crowded theater. So you say what you want to, unless it takes place. And that sort of can get us back to January 6th. We're taught this. The law students are taught this. Journalism is taught this. But yet the president used incendiary language that led to the insurrection attempt on January the 6th, 2020. That was true. But now we're trying to do gymnastics about trying to prove what's in his mind. No, we make a social contract that we give up our absolute rights so that the government might protect us. Then the next component of our values as a country is popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty. And that's the ideal that the government's power comes from the consent of the governed. And that's in direct response to the monarchy, meaning that you're in charge because the people say you're in charge. When the people say you're not in charge, you're no longer in charge, which means elections have consequences. That's what that means. And then lastly, republicanism, small r. And that is elected leaders represent the people. When we were looking at types of government last week, looking at totalitarianism, authoritarianism, democracy, limited monarchy, absolute monarchy, and a direct democracy or a representative democracy. America is a representative democracy. We're not a direct democracy. We don't vote on everything. We vote for people who vote. So I want you to see that gap. And sometimes we misunderstand that. So when it's time to put a light bulb up, we all don't vote, do we put a light bulb up? But we vote for people who will determine if the light bulb goes up and what it looks like. So again, our values in our country, whether we live up to them or not, are 5 particular areas: limited government, a belief in natural rights, a commitment to a social contract, popular sovereignty, and republicanism. Questions, comments, observations?
Well, let me see. I actually did have a question about something. Well, when we're talking social contract here, how do people really understand that particular concept of it? Because it could be interpreted rather broadly.
It is interpreted very broadly, but we participated in all the ways. So watch this. Here we are in our Zoom. There are no rules posted up. We have engaged in a social contract that Adolphus Lacey is the instructor. And therefore, we give up our freedoms to speak when we want to, even though we can, unless we are recognized by Adolphus Lacey. That's a social contract. And we agree to it. And guess what? We will impose punishments on those who refuse to engage in the social contract. And how do we do that, Justin Nelson?
You did. Question about something.
Go ahead, let Justin say it. I set him
we're
up.
talking social contract here.
You about to be an example.
How do people really understand
So basically, we
that
mute,
particular concept
like,
of it?
Please do it. Mute him.
we
Thank
mute,
you.
we remove, and things like that.
So we mute or remove. So maybe it was a bad disconnect, Chris, but you kept talking when I was talking and I invited Justin to come in. And underneath our social contract, I have the authority to say who speaks and when they don't speak. And if they're not abiding by the rules, we can mute them or we can boot them. And so that's but what I'm just saying is we do that just right now in Zoom. You form a social contract with people on the elevator, when you're driving in traffic, that you still agree that you're going to ride on the right side of the road and not the left side of the road. We engage in that. But all I want to say, it's negotiated, because there might be a group of people that say, no, it is dangerous. And it's dangerous for us to drive this way. In London, they have less accidents and this, and then we will negotiate that. So that's it. But bring Chris back in, because I don't think you heard us. I know you weren't talking when I was talking.
Hello?
Okay, Beckwith?
No, I didn't have anything else to say, but I see what the point was when you were playing me. I caught that. It took me a while. I was like, oh, I see what he did.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to do it, but I used that as a term. But nonetheless, but what do we think about that in terms of, that's what America is: limited government, a belief in natural rights, social contract, popular sovereignty, and republicanism. Now, we're going to see how
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Why
yes.
Republicanism is elected leaders represent the people? Am I correct? Okay, why it's called republicanism?
Because before there was a political party that was called Republican. That's what Rome was, a republic. And a republic means you elect leaders to represent your interests. So like democracy is a root road of democratic, but you can be a Democrat but not really support democracy. That's what. Great question. I hope, did I answer, Anna?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
I got it.
You got, are you sure? You look like you want to say more.
No, I got it, because when you use the democratic issue, I figured it out.
Yeah, that's why I said small r.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. America is a republic. It's really technically not a democracy. We are a republic. We do not, again, we vote for leaders who then vote for the things that we want. So it's a two-step process. Where Switzerland is what we call a direct democracy, where all decisions everybody have to vote for. So in this republic, if we believe that Hakeem Jeffries is not voting our interests, or Charles Schumer's not, then our only recourse is to vote them out and put somebody else in there. But remember, it's still a second step. It's not a direct step. Is an indirect. So what we have is what's called an indirect democracy, and an indirect democracy can be republicanism or a parliament. It can be parliament, which is what they have in Israel and in Great Britain, in Ghana and other places. Nehemiah.
So, considering that we do have an indirect democracy, would the United States be considered a popular sovereignty? I mean, technically we technically can impeach a president, but impeaching a president doesn't necessarily mean that that president is removed. So would we be a popular sovereignty? And yeah, that's the first question.
The great question. And the only way it will be, because it's juxtaposed to the opposite, which would be a monarchy. So the only way that our popular sovereignty would be challenged is if somebody decided to, FDR ruled as president for 4 terms, and he had the consent of the governed, and that meaning they kept voting for him. Now the policy's changed. It says you could only serve 2 terms. Now we're a president to try to stay in office outside of that. Then now what they're doing is they're breaking the social contract. Even though the people might be for it, you're still breaking the contract that which was agreed upon in that regard. So it would infringe upon it. So the contract has to be changed. And our social contract is our Constitution. So you just can't decide to stay because you can declare. Now and again, you can decide to stay by trying to pull levers and declaring martial law and saying that we are in a time of war and there's no time for an election or the transition. But what you're trying to do is to find a way for your behavior to fit into our social contract. How about that? You see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So, but no, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Okay, so when we'll talk about the amendment that limits the president to 2 terms. And like I said, it was an amendment because historically, until FDR, presidents really didn't bother to serve more than 2 terms. And it was Washington himself that set the president because they asked if he was going to run again in 1896. So he said no, he decided not to do it because he didn't, want to could be construed as too powerful or what have you.
No, you're absolutely right. I was talking to my brother the other day, and he says, how do you teach this class? And I told him I teach it, but I got great students and they're going to add other stuff in here. So we co-teach it. And Deacon Beckwith, I love what you just said in there. And I want everybody to hear what he said. It was not in the Constitution that you served 2 years. It was a tradition. And we had a fool that we elected in the office in 2016 who therefore recognized traditions didn't matter. If it wasn't legal, if he wasn't bound to do it, and he still broke laws. But again, most of the stuff like releasing taxes, all of those other things, those are traditions. They're not bound by law. But because like when you go with FDR and people said, no, we don't want nobody to serve that long. So to make sure it didn't happen, they changed the social contract. But changing the social contract, it takes a whole lot of effort. Takes a whole lot of effort because not only you got to get 3/4 of the states, 2/3 of Congress. So they make it so hard that it has to be an overwhelming agreement. But when something is close, it can't change. And that's what we get friction in, because basically our government basically is about 45 to 45 or 46 to 46. And then you just got that middle. That's where we are. I mean, it's amazing that now Supreme Court justices, whether they Democrat or Republican, can pass with maybe 51, 52, 53 votes. Ruth Gator Ginsburg, when she was confirmed, she passed with 96 votes. 96 votes in a Republican-controlled Congress. Again, the values have changed and that people are pretending, and that's what I'm saying. They're walking around carrying that Constitution in their pockets, but not knowing it. And my job in teaching us civics is just for you to know, I'm telling you, this is what it's built upon. A limited government that protects people's rights, natural rights. Now, again, where we go and stay in here is that they try to think that we weren't human and women weren't human. Well, we have now accepted that that's not true. A social contract, it don't have to be written out. Later on, it was written out, called a constitution, but we engage in social contracts with all people. And then popular sovereignty, therefore you rule by my consent, meaning I agree or I rebel. And then the republicanism is, but I select somebody to be able to represent me. That's our values. But now here we are now, we're looking at a rise of the right. And I don't mean they might think they're morally right, but that's not my intent. It's challenging to see this. Hence, we have these terms, right wing, left wing. And basically, these are the extremes of the political spectrum. And we're in a season where the right is rising. And it's scary, the extreme. Because let me also be so clear to the people of Bethany Baptist Church and Bethany Nation, those who are watching us, you are not extreme left. You are not. You got so many concerns about sexuality and what transgender means in terms of politics and in terms of how much the government can tell you about the environment. I mean, it's like, you're like, no, most people typically try to be center, whether you left of center or right of center. Very seldom are you truly an extreme. And so when I'm looking at the extremes is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about right or left. I'm talking about the extreme left and extreme right. And their ideologies center around the rights of the individuals versus the right or the power of the government. Which one belongs to which group? And why? Nobody? And I have a handout in the program.
Well, those on the left tend to believe everybody is equal. No matter who you are, you all have the same rights, and you should be granted the same rights. Men, women, etc., etc. Go down the litany. On the left.
Okay.
Those on the right, if you think of the hardliners, it's almost contradictory in the way this country works, that the Republicans say they want limited government, and yet they want the government, especially in the current iteration of the Republican Party, they almost want authoritarianism, that they believe in their leader, do or die. And,
Okay, I like that, Gary. And I wrote this question intentionally because it can be misleading, but it's making us think. So when you think of left wing or right wing, who focus on rights of the individual and who focus on the power of the government?
Republicans focus on the individual and Democrats focus on the government.
Okay, what What'd you say again? Say it again.
Republicans focus more on the individual, and Democrats focus more on the government.
Okay, so Jackie said it. I was just doing right and left, but okay, we can do that. Yes, that's what she said. So what they're saying is, and then what Gary then, okay, sorry. Now let's just play with this. If we accept what Jackie has shared, the Republicans talk about my right as an individual to make my choices, and the government has no say in what I decide to do. And then you have Democrats or left-leaning says the power of the government, that we should accept what the government says. What are exceptions to that we have seen this year?
When it comes to your own body, your rights to have control over yourself.
Okay, but say more. Like which one?
Over you.
Go ahead. Say more. Say more, Brenda. In which context?
Regarding abortions.
Okay.
Government wants to have control over your body, telling a woman whether they're not, they can. And the Republicans are easing up now because they realize their way is not popular amongst most Americans. So now they are adding little numbers to the play. But I think that government has no way of controlling a woman's body at all.
Well, it's funny. You're right, but it's just how you said it is nuanced. Let me fix what you just said. Or somebody else want to fix what she said, because she said she's almost right, but she kind of strayed a bit. Or do I need to do it, or who gonna help? Who gonna help her?
What about my Sarah?
She's sitting there like, oh no, I ain't touching that. But watch this. It's funny. I told you this way it's reworded because Brenda, no, you did hit it. But it's funny when you're saying this, when we define these politics, Republicans are for technically individual choices. The Republicans are not for the government deciding, but now they wish to do that. So you were right. I'm saying is that they flipping. You are now going against your grain, because that's why you say the government shouldn't tell you how to take your arms away. The government shouldn't tell you that you can't plant corn or give you environment policies. The government can't tell you all of this. And yet they say, but yet the government can tell a woman she can't have a choice. Now, watch this, because I got to teach and be fair. How does that look like on the left? Who believes in the power of government?
Okay, I think I can, as far as the left, what they wanted to do is to have the government, the federal government, to make sure that, that there are certain rights and protections that, that can't be superseded, or that, if the states decide they want to do something, if you put federal law, if you put something in the federal law, that's it. It automatically supersedes state law. So that's the thing. The right wing, they want to leave it up to the individual states to decide these things, but the left wing was like, no, the federal government needs to have these protections in place.
Right. They like to have these protections in place, but yet on this component, particularly in terms of the left's view of my body, my choice, when does the left do not believe it's your body and your choice?
Guns.
Well, the guns don't have to deal with your body. Some people think it does.
Vaccination.
Vaccination. That's, I mean, I want you to see, in both cases, both people have switched sides. Do y'all see that? It is Democrats that have fought valiantly, and I believe correctly, to say that people ought to get vaccinated. but it is the right that is like, oh, hell no. It's our body. How you gonna make us do this? But then you switch it, and when it comes to choice, and the Roe says that a woman has a right to choose, the government said it. They're like, oh no, that choice is wrong. That choice is wrong. So we need to change they believe that the government has the right to make the choice, but previously the government made the wrong choice. So they're going to use government to make the right choice. So do you see how they did? Again, you can use my body, my choice for both stories. Reactions. Y'all quiet. I'm working in Florida. I got a pool right there.
And I thought that was an interesting comparison. I never thought about it like that. But I thought, because when you started, I know the Democrats have their issues, but I didn't realize when you said the vaccination is democratic, wants everyone to be vaccinated because they push for it. And now we have the Republicans, when it comes to abortion, they're pushing that, not our body, not our choice. So everybody does have, that was pretty good. You made a good point there.
Oh, thank you very much. Because when you decide you want to do something, politics be damned. You just changed your whole story. It doesn't fit. Again, left wing is characterized by freedom, equity, and reform. So that means everybody has a right to decide whether they want to have a vaccine or not. But you can't go to work. You can't get on a plane. You can't travel. You got a vaccine. Sounds like you acting right wing. And then you got right wing characterized by duty, hierarchy, and tradition and nationalism. But yet you begin to say that you do not allow a woman to be able, that the tradition, it was already established since 1972, a 50-year tradition, and you thought to overturn it, it doesn't fit. Nehemiah.
Okay, so what if we play a little devil's advocate on the Democrat side, right? So the Democrats feel everybody should get a vaccine. If not, you can't go to work, you can't go to school, et cetera, et cetera. But is that really, and this is a question for Pastor Lacey and anyone else too, is that really my body, my choice, since the absence of a vaccine actually affects other bodies?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, yes, you're right. I mean, that's how I would make that decision, but that's a nuanced decision because, again, right now, I'm 52 years old. They told me I need to get the shingles thing, and I ain't ready to get shingles. I got too many vaccines. So now, but that was my choice. You didn't stop me from coming to work if I get shingles. So right now there is an anti-vaxxer crowd that is developing. And I agree with you. Like I said, it ain't just because, again, I love, somebody told me the other day, and she was being fresh with me. I don't know why. Why you want to be? I'm like, lady, I don't know you. You know, she wanted me to have a new mask. And I said, my mask is in my pocket. And she said, well, put on a new mask. I said, my mask is fine. Well, your mask has already got you've been breathing on it. I said, of course I'm gonna breathe on it. I said it because it's my mask. And she did say something profound. I did agree, even though she was nasty as can be. I would call her name out, but I won't get attention to her. But okay, like I said, somebody said, always listens to sisters. You better stop that lie. Because all of them ain't right. So she said that, but she did say this. She reminded me, the mask is to protect not you, but the other person. That's what the mask is for. And I said, at any rate, I still got the mask on. But the point was, she didn't like me taking my mask out my pocket to put it on to be able to go and participate in a church service. It wasn't at the History Making Bethany Baptist Church in Brooklyn, by the way. But yes, but as Nehemiah says it is correct, but I'm just still trying to say, remember, we're arguing from the total extremes. So let's be careful. We're not talking about splitting the baby in the middle and being pragmatic. So even about choice, many of you all say, yes, a woman can have choice in about, let's say the first trimester. Hell, the extreme left say she has a choice at any time. And many of you don't agree with that. Am I right about it? Are you
Oh, yeah,
afraid?
that was something I was going to bring up because, as far as religion, which, we're supposed to be based, separation of church and state. Now, there are probably a lot of people, on the left that, might be Catholic and do not believe in abortion. Them personally don't believe in abortion, but they won't alienate anybody, or they won't say that you don't have the choice to do it. You still would have the choice.
Well, no, what left might say you have a choice, but because that's what I'm saying with the rise of the right, which makes their argument so dangerous, which makes them grow. The right is growing all over, not just in the Republican Party, but even in the Democratic Party and all across the country. Because in that situation with abortion, they just simply say you're a baby killer. That is the point. The right is able to reduce things down to such a simplicity, but to be left is to be more nuanced. And like I'm saying, so to be left is to say that a transgender girl, a boy who became a girl, should be allowed to run in a track team. You're like, no, I don't know. See, we get caught in stuff like that. And then they'll come simply and say, no, that's not wrong. That's not right. It's in here. And they ain't saying the fairness, what you said, Deacon Beckwith. They'll say the Bible says this is an abomination. So they go from a simple grid being able to articulate, and we're trying to nuance to explain this freedom, this equity, and to be reformed. I don't. Hierarchy and duty, tradition, and this ain't acceptable. But the point is, left wing and right wing are two political extremes. But what I wanted to do, and we can still stay here, was just to show how does this outgrowth, not only taking, because a lot of times, many of us, you all watch stuff and you think America is all by itself. I watch BBC, I watch BBC Africa, I watch CNN Africa, CNN Europe, BBC America, BBC the regular. I mean, I watch Al Jazeera, I watch I-24, that's the Jewish network, and I try to learn different things. But I want y'all to know something happened in Europe this week that led me for us to be able to see that. Europe is on the verge. Well, it will happen because they have a parliament and they now have a controlling majority. But Giorgia Meloni, this is woman, Meloni, it will be Italy's first extreme white right-wing prime minister. I mean, almost, I ain't saying she is, but she's close to Mussolini. And if y'all know who Mussolini is, then we got problems already. We need to stop and do World War II history. Because Mussolini was a fascist. And I ain't necessarily, I'm careful about those terms, but you can still be fascist-like. Oh, wow, I love that. And I'm gonna use my sister for those, I've seen stuff. And somebody say, well, this looks like something. I got my vegans and they get the what do y'all use, Justin, to make the oxtails? What, shiitake mushrooms?
Yeah, king oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms.
There you go. And they'll like it. And if you don't know no better, it tastes like it. But for those who say, but it ain't an oxtail, but it can mimic an oxtail. So I'm not calling her a fascist, but she mimics her rhetoric fascism. And it's so funny. And her thing to stop African immigration was to build a naval flotilla to blockade, to stop it, to stop the migration of the darkies that are bringing over diseases and drugs and raping people. What that sound like?
Sounds like what 45 was saying about the Mexicans.
And what did he decide he was going to do?
Build the wall.
Build a wall. See, that's the point. And so whether or not it's It's Melanie or Orban in Hungary, or Duda in Poland, and Emmanuel Macron, whom everybody loves. You know, French print, oui, little French playboy. They love him, but he almost lost to Le Pen. French almost went right wing. It was a very, very, very close battle. And that's what gave birth to Donald Trump. We missed the point. If you think this whole world revolves around the United States of America, are you aware? And now we want to blame Joseph Robinette Biden. The whole damn world is going through inflation right now, that every central bank in the world is raising interest rates. Are you aware of that? Did I tell somebody something they didn't know? Please tell me no. Please let me know. Anybody? So y'all knew that. So why are we mad at? Because that's the only response to be able to do. So here we are with this rise. So what fuels this rise of this nationalism? Because that's the root of the right wing I want to talk about. Not necessarily traditionalism, but this nativism, this tribalism, this nationalism. And nationalism and tribalism actually were able to arise during the Industrial Revolution, or more importantly, during the Age of Enlightenment. And during the Age of Enlightenment, that began to shed a critique of the failure of the church or of the religious enterprise. So what used to unite people together was faith. So you could be a Catholic, in Rome, and a Catholic in Spain, a Catholic in Accra. You could be all over there. But when you begin to expose and then later on become Protestant, as they were turning out, once you begin to expose this through the Age of Enlightenment, recognizing that these priests were full of failures just like you, they're no better. Recognizing that pastor get his teeth done at the same den as you do, got his car done, he ain't no better than you. That then makes you begin to not necessarily make your identity connected to the faith. So that vacuum created the need for these nation states to give you something to rally upon, to say what you were. And now what's challenging, because that was the fundamental thing of nationalism, say, no. I mean, I laugh at this and it's funny because we can go through, now, how was nationalism displayed in New York City? On a micro level, just an example. It's just an example.
The richer people?
No, not the richer people. Well, you could say that, but that's still incomplete. How do we see now? Think about what nationalism is, where you're repping where you're from. How about that?
Poor people. Poor people.
No, not necessarily the poor people. Y'all still missing a couple, because the rich and the poor can work together. What's that?
Neighborhoods.
Neighborhoods. So what do those neighborhoods say, Midwood?
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, Midwood is like a mix of well, I think Midwood does have a lot of Europeans there, mainly from Israel. A lot of them that have connections to Israel.
But let's go simpler. Let's go simpler than that. Bed-Stuy, do or die.
Thank you very much. Chris went deep. All I'm just saying is, Chris, you rep Midwood. You don't, if I said, hey, Deacon Betwood from Bed-Stuy, I am not from Bed-Stuy, I'm from Midwood.
No, well, technically, actually, I'm from Crown Heights. I went to high school in Midwood, but I'm from Crown Heights.
What I'm saying is, what you just did right here, you provided my example. To say Deacon Alvarez is from Crown Heights, but yet he's from Queens. He said, no, my brother, I'm from Queens. Or for somebody to say, no, I'm from the Bronx. We are real intentional, whether we are Black, whether we're white, whether we're rich or we poor, we identify with that to say, no, this is the area that I am. That's the point that I'm trying to say. That's the piece of what that nationalism is. And then we hate when outsiders come in and interlope into our space. How about that? Is that a little bit clearer? So now when you're looking at this rise of the right, you're able to see this through this anti-immigrant sentiment. Because national identity is about us in isolation. Therefore, ain't no better place to get pizza than in Bed-Stuy. Ain't no better place to get jerk than in Bed-Stuy. Ain't no better church. I mean, you just stay there. You stay isolated and you identify with it, not wanting to leave it. And just like it can happen in neighborhoods, it can happen in countries. And so therefore, you draw attention to those that are coming. So when you're looking particularly at Europe and America, and I put the Americas, you're looking at aspects where they are offended or trying to dissuade Africans, Middle Eastern and Latin Americans from immigrating into their countries. I mean, Donald Trump had his China stuff in there, trying to blame the what's the name on Chinese people. But ideally, so I can still put that in there, but ideally is Africans, Middle Eastern, and there's no such thing as Middle East, because Middle East is in Africa, but I'm just doing it because that's the way it's described. And Latin Americans, that they're saying they can't come. Because think about this. If we're so concerned about our border, then why aren't we building a border on the north? There's no border between Canada and the United States. I mean, no border wall. It's a fence. People hop over that fence all the time. Ain't no problem.
Canadians are mostly white.
I was getting ready to say that. Exactly.
And that's what I was saying. When you're looking at Africans, Middle Eastern, and Latin Americans, you're looking at people who are non-white. And that's the challenge there, is what this whole new right wing that's taking place in Europe, that Donald Trump is also saying, and his ilk, Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of those election deniers, at bottom, they're saying that black and brown and yellow countries are not welcome here, because they said they bring their problems and their diseases. And let's be clear, if there are problems and diseases in those countries, 9 times out of 10, we're the ones that cause them and destabilize those countries that cause them to even come here. And even I said, and just look at this. For those of you all who like Wheel of Fortune, when I'm talking about this stuff, about how that stuff takes place, y'all watch. Can you imagine on Pat Sajak's allowed to do on Wheel of Fortune to be able to do eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a by its toe. And it was Tiger. It's like, really? Do your homework. What the hell? Can they get a clue? Can y'all believe that? And in this day and time, you just can't believe you who's advising you? And then we saw a picture with Pat Sajak and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is it possible that he's sending signals? That's what I want us to see. Trump's forever sending signals. They're trying to rise back up. But when they're rising back up, it's to take, again, it's tradition and hierarchy. To say, it is my duty to reclaim my perch, that the white man is on top, and to put this black man, this black family, this black woman in their place. And watch this. And they'll use a black man to do it, or a black woman. That's what happened. I'm just telling you that. I ain't making it up.
So you're saying that's the case in is that the case in Georgia, where they're trying to poor Herschel? I think he played in the era with soft helmets.
I don't know. Remember, I'm preaching there on Sunday. I don't know. Who is Herschel? I mean, I'm not familiar with that name. And what sport you talking about? Is that
All right.
is that American soccer? I mean, is that European soccer? I have no concept of.
Baseball.
Is it David Walker? I have no concept of any other type of Walker.
Can we turn this around for a second? Just in all honesty, how do we feel being in the history-making Bethany Baptist Church in the great neighborhood of Bedford-Stuyvesant as we see the neighborhood gentrifying? Do we feel that we are being invaded?
Yes, you can.
No.
Yes, nationalism does not necessarily have to just be towards some. And nationalism is a thought of preserving. So at the root of a nationalism, or what we're saying a right stream, is a commitment to a tradition. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with non-whites coming in. It could be young people in coming in and trying to change the decor. But what you end up doing is you set up systems to try to prevent people from coming in, or more importantly, people from changing it. So for example, where we are, we're in a historical building area. So you just can't change the outside. You can do whatever you want to do on the inside, but you can't change the outside. So those are the ways that you try to fight back. But yes, you could say that we could be very nationalistic and not want people who do not look like us, not our children, coming over because they do not respect our ways. And when they don't respect our ways, they ignore your ways and your ways die. So remember, it's about tradition. Left wing's about reform. It's about, you know what, yesterday's gone. And I'm talking about that. I find myself at that at Bethany. Bethany had deaconess for 90-something years, 99 years. This young boy who ain't 99 thought it better than the 99 years of people who were there to say, we're going to make them all deacons. That's a real critique of that. And I will withstand that. I think I still did it because I believe in the power of reform. But somebody could also say there's also a power of tradition. And that's what we'll be celebrating our 140th church anniversary, or my pastor's 9th anniversary. So that is very, very good, Gary. Love it. Anybody else want to chime in?
I want to chime in on something anti-immigrant. In regards to Ukraine, I have a problem. I'm not being unsympathetic. Initially, when the war went out, I was happy with the fact they were trying to help them, send money and stuff like that. But recently, every time we turn around, we're sending money to Ukraine to help them. Yeah, we have Black and brown people, immigrants keep coming in this country. They're not taking care of them. And also, we have our own issues here in terms of they didn't have money for Black and brown in shelters and other places, but yet we have all these billions of dollars to continue to send to Ukraine to help them out.
Yeah, that's very good. It's funny, I was speaking to somebody about that, and I wish I had time to deeper research that. I hear the sentiment, but I will give an example that you have given is that the people that were in the shelters were then asked to move out for the Ukrainians to be able to come in, or
absolutely
moved out and sent. I didn't see that news story, but yeah, that's excuse me. Yes, that's very problematic, and I agree with that. That's very problematic, and that's the politics of immigration that these Southern governors are sending these migrants, because they're sending these migrants to cities that call themselves sanctuary cities, which are also cities where you have Black mayors. So they're kind of forced in a situation to try to be able to respond and not turn them away, but also to be able to show love and respect to those that are in there. Now, let me just say this. Again, I've been on our current mayor on how he treated the homeless people before there was a Ukrainian crisis, because I still did not reflect the dignity that they certainly deserved. And so, but that being said, if they find themselves in a political pickle, trying to find itself to adjust themselves. And when we see these money and these monies, these numbers and this money, you're right, we end up saying, how can we send it? Well, because what America has agreed to do, which what I want you all to see, and it ain't me, but it's America. The president does not have a line item veto, but what the president and what Congress agreed to is to allocate certain monies to certain things. And right now, same thing in New York City. We cut budget to education, but yet we increase policing. Our money goes to our defensive budget. That's where all the money is going. We spend so much money on our defense, sending stuff. So what I want you all to say, we got to do a better way of being able to get more for some of the things that we want, that are needed, because you just can't say they spent it there. It was allocated. It's trillions of dollars, and some of it is in missiles, some of it is, but it's still underneath the Defense Department. The biggest budget in New York City is not the fire department, it's not the Department of Education, it's not the health department, it's the police department. And then the police, therefore, allocate that based upon the budgets that they have. So that money is not coming. So what you got to understand, the money is not taking away from you. It was already allocated to the defense budget, and it's only spent for defense purposes. So our desire is to be able to cut the defense budget. And that's what we got in trouble with by that language that the young people had already saw, defund the police. And then they were able to reuse that. And what did Biden say? Biden says, no, don't as he struggled to say it. I wish I could stutter and say it. Don't defund the police, refund the police. It was the stupidest and most embarrassing time that I've seen him, worse than falling up the steps. But that's trying to play toward that audience. But our young people are absolutely right. So when you look at the stuff like, so the defense budget don't get cut. Everything else gets cut. So that's what we first do. So it's not an apple to oranges type of thing, but it is a fair critique that we can find money in houses for Europeans that we're engaged in a war, and Afghanis. Let's be clear, the same thing happened to get the Afghanis here, but we ain't got no money for Haiti.
Exactly.
We ain't got no money for Mexico. We ain't got no money for Venezuela or Ecuador. That piece is true, but the way we fight it is by being able to take the money away from the Pentagon. That's the best way, because what we want to do is to take our money from the Pentagon and give it to the Department of Education or some other place. But even though I said the Department of Education, I'm glad I just said that. Giving money, remember, the things that matter most to you, that affect us the most, is not paid for by the federal government. It's paid for by your state and local government. Federal government's ultimate job is federal government don't take care of homeless. They will give you some grants. Federal government does the safety of the United States, the infrastructure. And that's that code that I was telling you all about, the contract, that therefore states give up some rights to the federal government. The biggest one is the gasoline tax. The federal government gets the money for the gasoline tax to pay for your roads. And they use the gasoline tax against Arizona, who did not want to make Martin Luther King's birthday a federal holiday and did not want to raise their wage for the kids driving. And so the federal government can say, because remember, when you talk about states' rights, a state can say the speed limit is 100 miles a gallon. 100 miles an hour. Federal government would say that exceeds our standards. If you do that, we will not give you money for federal roads. That's the type of thing, sadly, that it's just real. It's in there. But Anna, you hit that hard. You really did. And that's what people see, and that's what we always see. But let me also say this, like they said, we got this bill, they got an Asian bill, they got this bill. And I'm not trying to be a Biden apologist, but for the CBO just scored Biden's number for the $10,000 And then for some $20,000 debt reform, do you know that's $400 billion? And there are people that I talk to, and there's some people that are even on this call right now and say 10,000 ain't enough. Maybe not for you, but right now I can use $10,000. I can. And there's some people who have a Pell Grant is $20,000, but the aggregate is $400 billion. Wow. And those are interesting things to see on how information and numbers come out to be able to see things. And if we don't know them, you can't be held accountable. And that's what you ultimately, or Pastor Lacey or Reverend Sharpton or those who are in there say, oh no, if you're going to boat lift some Ukrainians, can you boat lift some Haitians? They're saying they're suffering from political economy. Can you bring somebody from Venezuela or Ecuador? That's what we fight for. It's not to say it's not wrong or right, because that's our international aspect. And I told you all, I can't wait till I still ain't seen The Woman King. I got to watch that. And I told you, I got to watch the U.S. and the Holocaust, because America was very, 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 very late to be involved with Hitler's massacre of the Jews. And obviously we can clearly see America was very, very late with regards to slavery, because we banned international slave trade, but continue the domestic slave trade for more and more. And then inculcated values that if you were born a slave, you stayed a slave. So that's the point that we pull up. Before we go further, any other questions?
Can I just
go ahead? Yes.
Throw, because something that you said in answer to Anna's question makes me wonder, is it easier because, okay, so one of the things the federal government is charged with doing is to have our mutual protection. So for the greater good of the people, they're the ones who defend us, and therefore they allocate the military budget, et cetera, versus, a lot of the humanitarian efforts, for lack of a better word, are dealt with by the state and local government. So it almost seems like it's easier for the federal government to say, here, we can give money to the Ukraine, than it is to force local government to say, hey, do a better job of housing for immigrants.
Oh, yes. No, you're right. Hence, that's what we had the last bill the last significant bill. Well, I mean, Obama might say that it is Obamacare, but the last significant bill that was passed in the pantheon of Black bills for Black liberation was the Fair Housing Act 1968, which was done after the death of Martin Luther King Jr. And in that regard, that's what that was dealing with the federal government. That's why you got those block grants, being able to send it. But here's the point, what you hit, Gary, was very, very true. Federal government very seldom sole sources. They give the money to the states. And then sometimes, like in New York City, they make exceptions. So New York is a good, rare place. I don't know how they do it in California, and I'm sure it might be the same way in some other places. But in New York, the federal government gives money directly to New York City, and they give money directly to New York State. So like if I'm in Westchester, I still got to play with the governor to get money. But if you're in New York City, you get a pipe string from the federal government that you don't have to deal with the governor. They take out the layer in some of the major cities. And I mentioned like Philadelphia. I don't know that criterion. I'll look up that for next week to see that. But what Gary said, the overall truth is true. And so therefore, I gave it to you for you to be able to handle that. And what the states would say, some of the states would say, these are unfunded mandates. So I do believe that what allows the city to be a sanctuary is likely the federal government sends the money to them. Even though they're in California, Massachusetts, in there, it'd be ironic to see if there's sanctuary cities in Texas or Florida. I'm gonna research that for y'all too, because it's good. This is good stuff. That's why I love having this class, just being able to think and brainstorm together. And you give me a desire to get better. Good stuff. Anybody else?
Oh, sorry. You can
Go ahead, Lily. Go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to say that in reality, the USA, like the government doesn't really care about Ukraine as much as like people may think. Like in reality, all the money they send to Ukraine is all to stop like communism from spreading, not like actually helping the country out itself. That's all I wanted to say.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And here's the critique to your wonderful scholarly answer. And thank you for your participation in here out of the mouths of babes. This has to more do with Russia, not about Ukraine. That's what happened with Venezuela. That's happening with Cuba. That's actually what it is in here to stop the spread of, again, another worldview. Not necessarily even communism, but just another worldview. America wants to be the sole superpower. So these weapons are doing that. But also, when we talked about this, just like there's a prison industrial complex, there's a military industrial complex. These arms don't come from nowhere. So McDonald's, not McDonald's where you eat, McDonald's that makes the airplanes, Whitney and Boeing and all of them, they getting paid billions of dollars to make these. What it ain't like they just cut a check. They cut a check and some people get jobs and stuff like that. Good stuff. Thank you, Lily. I love it. All right, let's try to wrap up because I still got more to go. But now we look at the 2022 midterms. And midterms are different than other times of the year because sadly, we've been conditioned to participate in presidential elections, which are every 4 years. And then you got off-year elections or midterms, the 2022 midterms. And typically midterms are lower numbers, but you get more engaged voters. It's somebody that watches this process. And it typically punishes the party in power. So whoever is the president or is controlling, they typically end up losing. So what am I saying? So watch this, so you can get this. In our Congress consists of the representatives of the House representatives. And there are 435 seats in the House. Everybody in the House is up for elections. They run for elections every 2 years, which means they really serve for 1 year and run for the other. That's what happens. But then for the Senate, the senator seat for election, there's 34 up out of 100. 34 out of 100. So now in this aspect, the senators are divided into 3 classes whose terms are staggered over 3 years, over 6 years, excuse me, so that a different class is elected every 2 years. And the class 3 senators who were elected in 2016 will be up for election in 2022. So currently for class 3, there are 14 Democrats and 20 Republicans, which that's why the Senate is more in the House, because the Republicans are playing uphill. They got to defend 20 senators. They got to defend 20 seats. Democrats only got to hold 14. If they hold, they still got it. If they pick up, and some of y'all know, isn't it easier to pick up than to hold? But here's the scary part. When you see it, it can be good or bad. But I heard this fact today when I was doing my research. 95% of officials in Congress who seek re-election achieve it. %95. Meaning if they want it, they'll get it.
Or are you surprised by the power of the incumbency?
That's what that word is. It's called incumbency. That's correct. That's how they do it. And what do you get because of incumbency?
Well, besides having a bigger war chest as far as funding your campaign, you've got a lot more loyal followers.
Okay, so you already got name recognition, you got money, you got a staff, and you get to mail stuff out. You ain't got to mail out campaign stuff. All you got to do is say, you just mail out regular information. Now, anybody else who want to meet with you, they got to pay for their staff. They got to pay for their mail. They got to build their name up. And most people who give to somebody who's already been proven to be there. And then what they get to do every 10 years.
That's right, the census.
They get to redraw their districts because of the census to create what we call safe districts. And that's what's been happening over this period of time. See, that's what I'm saying. We can critique it all we want to, but we want to see how it's fundamentally flawed in the first place. They get to draw their own districts. Every now and then a court can jump in and say that this is unfounded and this and that and the other. So we have this in the 2020, but what draws them is not even just the person, but the most important thing for us to be able to see in our midterms is state laws affect voter turnout. Some states create structural barriers that make it more difficult to vote. Like in Montana and Wyoming, a photo ID. Really? And I didn't get to finish. And Louisiana and others. It's a whole bunch. I think it's 18 states that want a photo ID. But look at this. And if you want to do, sorry. That's if you're doing an absentee ballot, you got to put a picture of you in it. But then you have notary absentee ballot. So if I'm going to vote and I got to be in Florida, the election's tomorrow, it tells me I got to get a notary in Missouri, Oklahoma, and Mississippi. And wait, there's more. If you want to vote absentee, you need a witness in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, Minnesota, and Iowa. Wouldn't that discourage you? But wow, look what happens that some states make stuff easier. Can you believe that you have same-day voting? And listen to these states: California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Hawaii, North Dakota. North Dakota, you don't even have to register. You just got to live there. You ain't even got to register. So maybe I just go to North Dakota and vote. Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Maryland, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. The same day you go to vote, you can register. Now, many of you all thought New York was one of the most progressive states in the world, didn't you? Didn't you? Come on, tell the truth. Thank you, Brenda. The rest of y'all just looking at me, or maybe it's your picture because you eating. I don't know. So, but the point is, it's like, wow, we're not even on here. New York, we just got early voting 2 years ago. Look how behind we are in this regard. New York, does anybody know how long before the election that you can vote in New York? Register, typically?
4 weeks. Is that right?
You almost, a little more. It's 25 days. You're very good, 25 days. And so they feel good. We're better than Texas, which is 30 days. You know, but it's 25 days. That's what it is. But look at those states that are able to do that. But that's the point, to be able to see, you know, and then in Georgia, now you can't get nobody water, you know. So there are things that we can do to make people vote, things that we can make people to not make people vote. But then you could also do things that are initiatives that could draw people to vote because they're concerned about the issue. So in the 22 issue, we have abortion-related ballots. In California, Michigan, Vermont, they are trying to approve the state constitutional right for women to have an abortion. And basically what that means is when Roe was struck down, they wish to inculcate in their state the reality that a woman has a right to be able to choose. and they're voting on that again in California, Michigan. Voting for that in California, Michigan, Vermont. They're voting for that. Now, it was already created in Kansas and it's been done in Kentucky. And that is to say that, and it's so funny when you look at this language because it got confusing. So in California, Michigan, and Vermont, they were voting to approve that the state constitution has the right to be able to change it and say no, and say yes and inculcate it, to approve it. So in that aspect, you would vote yes. Kentucky is doing the same stupid stuff that Kansas did to deny that the state constitution has the right to do so. So you would still vote yes. It's tricky. And Kansas people voted yes. And so we'll see how the Kentucky people are able to be able to vote. Do you all see that nuance? See, you're voting yes to approve and yes to deny. It's confusing. And then in Montana, they're voting that infants born alive in any stage, I didn't mean O-R, it should be R, A-R-E, are legal persons. So therefore entitled to Medicare and everything, then you're supposed to save their lives. So that's their way of trying to get around it. If the baby is born by cesarean or abortion, any type of way, if the baby is alive, when the baby comes out, you're supposed to fight. The baby has legal rights. You're supposed to fight for the baby to live. At any stage. With Down syndrome, at any stage. I mean, just think about that. So we have that. Then we have slavery-related ballot measures. Alabama, Louisiana, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont. Can you believe that? Now, the good news is it sounds worse than what it is. The bad part is if people don't vote for it. Because what these ballots would do is that they will end the exemption or the exception in the 13th Amendment. Remember, the 13th Amendment says slavery is abolished unless somebody's in prison. So what these 20 other states have already done it. I didn't check to see if New York State is one of them, but I don't think it is. So it will end it. So just imagine if you're now in Alabama, Louisiana, and Tennessee, do you think they're gonna pass it? What'll happen if it don't pass? Think about that. And then we have race-related ballot measures. New York City residents will vote on these proposed amendments to the New York City Charter. And they'll be on the ballot on November 22nd. The person who's been leading this is our member. She's the chair, Jennifer Jones Austin is doing that. And there are 3 questions that'll be on the ballot. I don't go over them all. I'm just going to go over the vote. Is that ballot 1 would add a statement of values to guide the government. Watch this. Is that not what I did? The U.S. government is based on ideals of living in government, including natural rights, popular sovereignty, republicanism, and social contract. That's what they're saying that would do. And saying what basically talk about the preamble to the New York City Charter. So you got to vote on number 1. Number 2 would be establish a racial equity office planning commission that would review the progress and the actions of what we're doing to be able to achieve racial equity every 2 years, developing strategies to be able to prove some stuff, appointing people in the commission. You say yes or no to that. We'll see. And then the third one is to measure the true cost of living. In other words, what does it cost to live in New York City? Now, the best part I do love about people who did challenge Biden's $10,000, given your grants forgiven, your loans forgiven for $10,000, and you live in New York City is different than having your $10,000 forgiven if you live in Kansas City. Cost of living is different. how you spend and allocate your money. And so therefore, they would be able to try to figure out essentially, what does it cost to live in there? Now, it doesn't make you do anything, but if you have a true cost of living, then you can have a true living wage. So if it costs to live $25 an hour in New York, then you can then it's foolish to ask for $24. You follow me? It's an inverse. So that's what we're going in there. Questions, comments of anything that I've shared for you. And again, I didn't read it all because I made a copy of it, and you can go to the Racial Commission on Justice. You can certainly do that. And so Jennifer will certainly be at our church and doing that. She's been on the radio and talking about these things. So, but people don't know. We don't know about ballot initiatives. And sometimes we sign ballot initiatives and they turn out bad and we hate them, because what's the ballot initiative that we signed and we approved, and then after we got it, we hated it?
That
Bill
percentage
reform.
voting,
What, Terrell, go ahead.
something about the percentage of
Ranked choice voting.
right, yeah.
We voted for ranked choice voting, and when it came, you all hated it, including your current mayor. He went to court and said black folk ain't smart enough. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot almost. All right. I ain't make it up. It is a fact. Any questions, comments, observations? Y'all can see I start acting a fool when I see the clock is going out. Okay, well, look, I said everybody is in order. Again, as I said in the beginning, I hope to be traveling tomorrow. So I'm going to pause one more time. For October the 5th, we will start our Bible study, looking at if grace is true. We'll do that. We'll not have Bible study on this coming this coming Wednesday. Certainly continue to ask you continue to pray for our ministry in the church. Thank God for an opportunity. I'll be away this Sunday, preaching at the Ebenezer Baptist Church for the 17th anniversary for the Reverend Dr. Raphael G. Warnock. And so certainly praying that I'll be able to uphold our mantle, but our ministry don't stop. Our executive pastor, Reverend E. Tyrone Pittman, will be preaching, and you honor me with your presence. I can tell you this because you're grown enough to know that it ain't just about me. It ain't about your favorite singer, about your favorite preacher. It's certainly about our commitment. And if you hear somebody, and I dare you, you hear somebody say, "Oh, pastor ain't coming, I ain't coming." I dare you to correct them. I mean, I'm just serious. We got to begin to do that. Otherwise, because guess what you say when you see me every time you get to, "Pastor, get some rest." Like, really? And then when I'm away, you get mad. I mean, even though it's not a rest, but it's still rest to be there and to be celebrated and affirmed, by other people. That's a high honor. And that's how I get people to be able to come to our church too. Because Warnock has now been to us for 3 incidents. So two. He came to Mount Olivet twice. So he's been with me for 4 times. And so I'm delighted to be able to go. He's certainly my big brother. So pray for me, encourage me to be able to represent you well, because they see Bethany Baptist Church, and that's where I am. So I thank God. That being said,
one reminder.
Oh yeah, reminder. Oh, thank you very much. Juanita reminded us is that tomorrow there is an event. Not tomorrow, Thursday, we are at preparing for our social justice component, working with East Brooklyn congregations. And so we certainly need those persons who've been able to come. If you wish to figure out what we're doing and what this justice component is, you reach out to Pastor Pittman and also to Robin Clark, because again, this is our organizing meeting, but we're gonna need you on November to be able to do this, because politicians count numbers. So to that end, prayer service won't start until October the 6th. So October the 6th. So as we come back in prayer, that will be online. So make sure you participate even in that. And if you didn't give a chance to give this Sunday, you can give Givelify, Push Pay. Some people I'm not going to start begging, but I'm going to remind you that you can give at any time you come across this ministry, because we're fueled and blessed and strengthened by your giving. Amen. That being said, I'm going to ask Deacon Betwith if he just can't close us out.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for this discussion. We thank you, oh Lord, for the lessons that we learn and the discussion that we have as we try to figure out and get a better understanding of how government works and what works for us and what doesn't work for us, and how we are empowered to change things. We thank you, oh Lord, for our pastor, Reverend Lacey, that he uses his talent, his time to work with us and explain these things so that we can be enriched and enlightened. Now, Lord, we ask that you grant him traveling mercies as he goes from one place to another. We ask, oh Lord, that you bless us as we dismiss from this meeting, but never from your sight. In the name of Jesus, we ask it all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. Thank you all. Love you all. What a great class. We have fun. We be killing it. Give it up for yourselves.
Okay. Pastor, how much of the book should we read before Bible study?
For next week, I'm just thinking about just the first 2 chapters.
Okay.
Because I'm going to deal with preconceptions, first of all, what grace is, like what we already start with, and then we'll dive into the story that Philip is telling. Yeah. Gotcha.
Thank you.
Perfect. I'll have it for the bulletin on Sunday, or for announcements on Sunday, to let you all know. Perfect. All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I need some ginger ale.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with Midwood, Chris. Not a thing.
That's true.
You got that right.
Oh, gosh. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Because
All right, good
all
night.
you Midwood people